My name is Meredith Thompson. I'm 28 years old, and I thought I knew what family betrayal looked like until I received that group text. There I was, sitting in my apartment after another exhausting day as a marketing coordinator, when my phone buzzed with a message that would shatter everything I believed about my family. The text was from my brother Brandon, sent to what I quickly realized was a family group chat that deliberately excluded me. The message was simple yet devastating. Can't wait for Mom's 75th birthday party at the country club this Saturday. Everything's booked and paid for. My hands trembled as the reality hit me like a freight train. My own family had planned an elaborate celebration for my mother without even considering inviting me. Before we dive deeper into this heartbreaking story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories of family drama and triumph. Trust me, what happens next will leave you absolutely speechless. So let's jump right into this roller coaster of emotions together. Growing up as the eldest child in the Thompson family, I had always been the responsible one, the caretaker, the daughter who tried desperately to earn love through perfect behavior and endless sacrifice. While my younger brother Brandon, now 32 and a successful lawyer, basked in the golden glow of parental pride for his every achievement, and my sister Ashley, 25 and undeniably beautiful, received constant admiration and financial support for simply existing, I found myself perpetually fighting for scraps of attention and approval. From the moment I could walk, I was expected to be the helper, the one who changed diapers, prepared meals, and cleaned the house while my siblings were free to pursue their dreams and desires without consequence. The pattern had been established early and reinforced countless times throughout my childhood and into adulthood. When Brandon graduated law school, our parents threw him a massive celebration party, inviting everyone they knew and spending thousands of dollars on catering and decorations. When Ashley got engaged 6 months ago, Mom immediately began planning an extravagant engagement party, complete with professional photography and a live string quartet. But when I received my promotion to senior marketing coordinator last year after working 60-hour weeks for 3 years straight, the acknowledgement came in the form of a brief, "That's nice, honey," during a rushed phone conversation. The exclusion had become so normalized that I barely noticed it anymore, or at least I told myself I didn't. But recent events had made the pattern impossible to ignore. Just 2 months earlier, I discovered through Instagram that my family had created a group chat called Thompson Core that included everyone except me. The realization came when Ashley accidentally posted a screenshot of the group chat while complaining about restaurant choices for Brandon's anniversary dinner with his wife. I could see the participant list clearly, and my absence was glaring and intentional. That discovery had stung, but I convinced myself it was probably just for planning surprise events or discussing topics they thought might stress me out. I had become an expert at making excuses for their behavior, crafting elaborate justifications for why I was consistently left out of family decisions, celebrations, and even casual gatherings. But this birthday party exclusion felt different, more deliberate and cruel than anything that had come before. As I sat in my apartment that evening, scrolling through the group chat messages that I could only see because Brandon had accidentally included me in this one conversation, the full scope of their planning became clear. They had reserved the prestigious Riverside Country Club, hired a professional catering company, arranged for a live jazz band, and even commissioned a custom birthday cake from the most expensive bakery in town. The guest list included over 50 people, from distant relatives to family friends I had known since childhood. Every detail had been meticulously planned and executed without a single thought given to including me. The emotional weight of this revelation crashed over me like a tidal wave, bringing with it decades of suppressed hurt and anger. I realized that I had spent my entire life being the family's emotional caretaker while receiving nothing but indifference and exclusion in return. Every birthday I had celebrated alone, every holiday I had spent making excuses for their absence, every achievement I had accomplished without their support suddenly crystallized into a painful pattern of systematic rejection. But as devastating as this discovery was, Nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to learn about my family's true nature. The birthday party exclusion was just the tip of an iceberg of deception and betrayal that would soon consume everything I thought I knew about the people who were supposed to love me most. The next morning, fueled by a mixture of righteous anger and desperate hope that this was all some terrible misunderstanding, I drove to my childhood home unannounced. The familiar brick colonial house looked exactly the same as it always had, but somehow it felt foreign and unwelcoming as I approached the front door. Through the large bay window, I could see my family gathered around the dining room table, surrounded by party planning materials, sample invitations, and what appeared to be catering menus spread across the polished mahogany surface. When I walked through the front door using my key, the conversation stopped abruptly, and 4 pairs of eyes turned toward me with expressions ranging from surprise to annoyance. Mom was the first to speak, her voice carrying that familiar tone of controlled irritation that I had learned to recognize as a warning sign throughout my childhood. "What are you doing here, honey?" she asked, the endearment somehow managing to sound more like an accusation than a term of affection. Before I could even formulate a response, Brandon jumped in with his characteristic condescending lawyer voice, the one he used when he wanted to make someone feel small and insignificant. "We thought you'd be too busy with your little marketing job to be bothered with family stuff," he said, not even looking up from the guest list he was reviewing. The dismissive way he referred to my career, which I had worked so hard to build, felt like a slap across the face. Ashley, ever the princess, couldn't resist adding her own cruel observation with a laugh that sounded more like a sneer. "Besides, you always make everything about yourself anyway. We figured Mom's day would be more peaceful without all your drama." The words hit me like physical blows, each one carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage. Dad, who had always been the family peacekeeper, sat quietly in his chair, studiously avoiding eye contact with me. His silence spoke volumes about where his loyalties lay, and it hurt almost more than the cruel words from my siblings. This man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had helped me with homework for years, who had once told me I could accomplish anything I set my mind to, now couldn't even bring himself to acknowledge my presence during what was clearly a coordinated family attack. But it was Mom's next words that delivered the knockout blow, spoken with a cold precision that revealed just how much thought she had put into excluding me. "We wanted one celebration without your negative energy, Meredith. Every family gathering becomes about your problems, your complaints, your need for attention. For once, we just wanted to have fun without walking on eggshells around your feelings." As I stood there, absorbing the full impact of their collective cruelty, I began to notice the elaborate details of their planning spread across the table. The invitation samples featured expensive embossed lettering and gold foil accents. The catering menu included items like lobster thermidor, prime rib, and champagne service. I could see venue rental agreements, contracts with entertainment providers, and receipts for deposits that made my head spin. A quick mental calculation suggested they were spending over $15,000 on this single event. The financial aspect added another layer of insult to the emotional injury. When I had asked for help with my student loan payments just 6 months earlier, I had been lectured about personal responsibility and told that I needed to learn to manage my own finances. When my car broke down and I needed a small loan to cover the repairs, I had been made to feel like a burden for even asking. Yet here they were, spending enough money to cover my rent for an entire year on a party that deliberately excluded me. "You never contribute financially to family events anyway," Ashley added, as if reading my thoughts. "Why should you get to enjoy something you haven't paid for?" The irony of this statement was not lost on me, considering that Ashley had never held a job for more than a few months and had been financially supported by our parents throughout her entire adult life. The combination of emotional cruelty and financial dismissal finally broke through my shock and disbelief, replacing it with a fury I had never experienced before. I turned to leave, unwilling to subject myself to any more of their coordinated attack, but as I reached the front door, I heard Ashley's voice one more time, speaking to the others as if I were no longer present. "Finally, we can have fun without the black sheep," she said, her words followed by what sounded like agreement from the others. The casual way she referred to me, The ease with which they discussed my absence made it clear that this had been a long-standing sentiment rather than a spontaneous decision. As I drove away from the house where I had spent the first 18 years of my life, my hands shaking with rage and hurt, I had no idea that this confrontation was just the beginning of a much larger and more sinister story. The birthday party exclusion, as painful as it was, would soon reveal itself to be merely the latest chapter in a decades-long pattern of manipulation and betrayal that went far deeper than I could have ever imagined. That evening, as I sat in my apartment trying to process the emotional devastation of the morning's confrontation, my phone rang with a call from an unexpected source. The caller ID showed Aunt Dorothy, my mother's older sister, whom I hadn't spoken to in over 2 years. Dorothy had been estranged from the family since a mysterious falling out that had never been fully explained to me, and I was surprised to hear her voice after such a long silence. "Meredith, honey, I heard about what happened today," Dorothy said without preamble, her voice carrying a mixture of sympathy and something else I couldn't quite identify. "I want you to know that I wasn't invited to your mother's birthday party either, despite the fact that I helped raise you kids when your parents were going through their rough patch in the early years." The revelation that Dorothy had also been excluded from the celebration was shocking, but somehow not entirely surprising given the family's pattern of systematic exclusion. What came next, however, would change everything I thought I knew about my family and my place within it. "There's something you need to know, something I should have told you years ago," Dorothy continued, her voice becoming more serious. "Your mother has been spreading lies about you to the extended family for years, telling people that you're unstable, demanding, and impossible to deal with. That's why so many relatives have stopped reaching out to you, why you don't get invited to family gatherings on that side." The news hit me like a physical blow, explaining so many mysterious changes in relationships that I had attributed to my own failings or the natural drift that sometimes occurs between family members. Cousins who had once been close had gradually stopped returning my calls. Aunts and uncles had become distant and formal during rare encounters, and invitations to extended family events had simply stopped coming. But Dorothy's most shocking revelation was yet to come. "Meredith, your grandmother left you something in her will, something significant that your family has been hiding from you for 3 years." My grandmother, who had passed away when I was 25, had been the one member of the family who had consistently shown me unconditional love and support. She had always told me that I was special, that I would accomplish great things, and that I should never let anyone make me feel less than worthy. "She left you her house and $50,000 in cash," Dorothy continued, her voice heavy with anger and regret. "The house where we grew up, the one with the big oak tree in the backyard where you used to play as a child. She specifically wanted you to have it because she saw how the family treated you, and she wanted to make sure you had something that was truly yours." The revelation that I had been denied my inheritance felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. $50,000 would have changed my entire life trajectory. I could have paid off my student loans, put a down payment on a house, started the small business I had always dreamed of. Instead, I had struggled paycheck to paycheck while my family enjoyed a windfall that was rightfully mine. Dorothy's voice became even grimmer as she explained the mechanism of the betrayal. "Your mother appointed herself as the executor of the estate, and she's been systematically diverting the funds for the past 3 years. I have copies of the original will and bank statements that show where the money went. A significant portion was transferred to Brandon's law firm for estate management fees that were completely fabricated. Ashley used part of the money for her lavish wedding preparations, including that ridiculously expensive engagement ring she's always flashing around." The scope of the financial betrayal was staggering, but even more devastating was the realization that this had been a coordinated family effort. Brandon, with his legal expertise, had helped structure the theft in a way that would be difficult to detect. Ashley had benefited directly from the stolen funds. Even Dad, through his silence and complicity, had participated in the deception. "I have proof of everything," Dorothy assured me, her voice becoming stronger and more determined. "Bank records, copies of forged signatures, documentation of property transfers that were never legally authorized. I've been gathering evidence for months, waiting for the right time to expose what they've done. As we talked late into the night, Dorothy explained that she had been estranged from the family precisely because she had tried to advocate for me regarding the inheritance. When she had questioned the delay in executing the will and demanded transparency about the estate's assets, she had been systematically excluded from family communications and ultimately told that her presence was no longer welcome at family events. "They're capable of much more than you realize, Meredith," Dorothy warned me as our conversation drew to a close. "If we move forward with exposing this, they're going to retaliate with everything they have. They'll try to destroy your reputation, your career, your relationships. Are you prepared for that kind of fight?" Looking back at the decades of emotional manipulation, the years of feeling like I was somehow defective or unworthy of love, and now understanding the extent of their financial betrayal, I felt a clarity and determination I had never experienced before. "I'm ready," I told Dorothy. "It's time for the truth to come out." As we began to formulate our plan, Dorothy suggested that the perfect opportunity for exposure would be the birthday party itself. "Let them have their moment of celebration, and then let's show everyone exactly who they really are," she said. "But be prepared, honey. Once we cross this line, there's no going back. Your family is going to show you just how vicious they can be when they're cornered." Little did I know that Dorothy's warning would prove to be prophetic in ways that neither of us could have anticipated. The battle that was about to unfold would test every ounce of strength and resilience I possessed, but it would also lead to revelations that would ultimately set me free from a lifetime of manipulation and abuse. The following morning, armed with Dorothy's revelations and a newfound sense of purpose, I contacted the family attorney who had handled my grandmother's estate. What I discovered during that phone conversation was even more disturbing than I had anticipated. The attorney, clearly uncomfortable with my inquiries, eventually admitted that there had been irregularities in the estate execution, but that he had been pressured by Brandon to overlook certain discrepancies in the documentation. "Your brother can be very persuasive," the attorney said carefully, and he assured me that the family had reached a private agreement about the distribution of assets. I should have been more thorough in my oversight, but frankly, I was intimidated by his legal expertise and his threats of malpractice suits if I delayed the process. Further investigation revealed that the financial betrayal was even more extensive than Dorothy had initially described. My mother had been illegally collecting my grandmother's Social Security benefits for 3 years after her death, using a combination of forged documents and false representations to the Social Security Administration. The monthly payments, totaling over $36,000, had been deposited directly into an account that Mom controlled. Brandon's role in the scheme was particularly calculating. As a practicing attorney, he had used his knowledge of estate law to create a paper trail that made the theft appear legitimate on the surface. He had drafted false documentation showing that I had voluntarily relinquished my inheritance rights, complete with a signature that bore no resemblance to my actual handwriting but had never been properly verified. The evidence-gathering process introduced me to an unexpected ally in the form of Jake Morrison, a private investigator who worked as a consultant for my marketing firm. When I confided in him about my situation during a coffee break, he immediately offered his professional services. "What your family is doing isn't just morally wrong, it's criminal fraud," he said with conviction. "I've seen cases like this before, and the perpetrators always assume they're too smart to get caught." Jake's investigation uncovered additional layers of deception that painted an even more disturbing picture of my family's willingness to exploit my grandmother's memory for their own gain. The custom jewelry that Ashley frequently wore, including several expensive pieces I had assumed were gifts from her fiancé, had actually belonged to my grandmother and had been specifically bequeathed to me in the original will. Even more shocking was the discovery of my mother's secret gambling addiction, which had apparently developed over the past 5 years and had been steadily draining the family's finances. The stolen inheritance money had been used not just for Ashley's wedding expenses and Brandon's legal fees, but also to cover gambling debts at several local casinos. Bank records showed a pattern of large cash withdrawals followed by immediate deposits of funds from the inheritance accounts. "Your father's medical bills from his heart surgery last year were also paid using your inheritance money," Jake informed me during one of our investigative sessions. The insurance company had refused to cover certain experimental treatments, so your mother used your funds to pay the $40,000 difference without ever consulting you. The revelation about Dad's medical bills created a complex emotional conflict for me. While I was grateful that he had received the treatment he needed, the fact that my own inheritance had been used to pay for it without my knowledge or consent felt like yet another violation of my rights and autonomy. It also explained why Dad had been so compliant with Mom's manipulative behavior. He was literally indebted to her deception. During this period of investigation, I received an unexpected phone call from Mrs. Rodriguez, a family friend who had known me since I was a child. She had heard through the community grapevine about my exclusion from the birthday party and was calling to express her confusion and concern. Your mother told several of us that you were dealing with mental health issues and that family gatherings were too stressful for you, Mrs. Rodriguez explained. She made it sound like you had specifically requested not to be included in family events. But that didn't sound like the Meredith I've known for 20 years, so I wanted to hear your side of the story. The conversation with Mrs. Rodriguez revealed that Mom had been conducting a systematic campaign to damage my reputation throughout our community. She had spread rumors about my supposed mental instability, financial irresponsibility, and inability to maintain healthy relationships. These lies had been carefully crafted to preemptively discredit me in case I ever tried to challenge the family's narrative. She's been telling people that you've been asking the family for money constantly, that you blame them for your problems, and that you've made threats against family members, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. Several of our mutual friends have been avoiding you because they believed these stories. I think it's time people knew the truth. As our plan to expose the family's deception at the birthday party began to take shape, Jake and Dorothy both emphasized the importance of having credible witnesses who could testify to the family's pattern of manipulation and abuse. Mrs. Rodriguez agreed to attend the party with us, along with several other community members who had been deceived by Mom's lies. The evidence we had gathered was substantial. Bank records showing the illegal transfers, copies of the original will, documentation of the forged signatures, casino records of Mom's gambling activities, and testimony from multiple witnesses who could speak to the family's deceptive practices. We had built a case that would be impossible for them to deny or explain away. But as we prepared for the confrontation, both Jake and Dorothy repeatedly warned me about the potential consequences of exposing the truth. Your family has shown that they're willing to go to extraordinary lengths to maintain their deception, Jake said during one of our planning sessions. When cornered, they're going to fight back with everything they have. Are you prepared for them to try to destroy your life? The question haunted me as the day of the birthday party approached. I knew that by choosing to expose the truth, I was risking not just my relationship with my family, but potentially my career, my social connections, and my entire life as I knew it. But I also knew that continuing to live under the shadow of their lies and manipulation was slowly killing my spirit and my sense of self-worth. The night before the party, I made peace with the potential consequences of my decision. Whatever happened, I would finally know the truth, and I would have the satisfaction of knowing that I had stood up for myself and for my grandmother's memory. The battle that awaited me would be brutal, but it was a battle that had been years in the making, and it was time to fight. The morning of the birthday party dawned crisp and clear, and as I prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most confrontational day of my life, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Dorothy arrived at my apartment an hour before we were scheduled to leave, carrying a large manila envelope containing all of our evidence, while Jake met us in the parking lot with his camera equipment and additional documentation he had gathered through his professional channels. The Riverside Country Club was exactly as elegant as I had expected, with its sweeping circular driveway, manicured gardens, and imposing colonial architecture that spoke of old money and established social hierarchies. As we approached the main entrance, I could see expensive cars filling the parking lot, a clear indication that my family had spared no expense in assembling an impressive guest list for Mom's celebration. The moment we walked through the doors of the private dining room they had reserved, the festive atmosphere came to an abrupt halt. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, champagne glasses froze halfway to lips, and every eye in the room turned toward us with expressions ranging from surprise to hostility. Mom, resplendent in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, was the first to recover from the shock of our unexpected arrival. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "You weren't invited for a reason, Meredith, and you have no business disrupting this celebration." The coldness in her tone was unmistakable, and it was clear that she intended to humiliate me in front of all the assembled guests. Brandon immediately stepped forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in as he attempted to take control of the situation. "This is harassment," he announced loudly, pulling out his phone with theatrical precision. "I'm calling security to have you removed from the premises, and then I'm filing a restraining order for stalking and intimidating behavior." Ashley, never one to miss an opportunity for drama, had already begun live streaming the confrontation on her social media accounts, narrating the scene for her followers with obvious relish. "My crazy sister just crashed our mom's birthday party uninvited," she said into her phone's camera. "This is exactly why we didn't want her here in the first place." The cruelty and coordination of their response confirmed everything I had suspected about their true nature, but it also strengthened my resolve to expose the truth. With Dorothy and Jake flanking me for support, I stepped forward and addressed the room in a voice that was surprisingly steady given the circumstances. "I'm here because my family has been lying to all of you for years," I announced, my words cutting through the murmur of confused conversations. "They've stolen my inheritance, spread malicious rumors about my mental health, and systematically excluded me from family events while profiting from money that was legally mine." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Mom's face flushed red with anger as she began shouting denials, calling me delusional, and accusing me of trying to ruin her special day. Brandon moved toward me aggressively, threatening legal action and demanding that I leave immediately before he had me arrested for trespassing. But it was Dad's reaction that surprised me most. Instead of remaining silent as he usually did during family conflicts, he suddenly stood up from his chair, his face pale and his hands shaking visibly. "Stop it," he shouted, his voice carrying a desperation I had never heard before. "Just stop all of this lying and manipulation. I can't take it anymore." The room fell silent again as Dad continued speaking, his words tumbling out as if a dam had finally burst. "She threatened to divorce me and take everything if I ever defended Meredith," he said, pointing at Mom with a trembling finger. "She's been blackmailing me for years, using my medical bills and my fear of losing my home to force me to go along with her schemes." The admission sent shockwaves through the assembled guests, many of whom had known our family for decades. I could see the confusion and disbelief on their faces as they tried to reconcile the image of the loving, devoted family they thought they knew with the ugly reality that was being exposed before their eyes. Dorothy stepped forward at that moment, her voice calm but authoritative as she began presenting our evidence to the stunned crowd. 3 years ago, Meredith's grandmother left her a house and $50,000 in cash, she announced, holding up copies of the original will. This family has systematically stolen that inheritance and used it for their own purposes while telling everyone that Meredith was mentally unstable and unworthy of support. As Dorothy continued to present bank records, forged documents, and testimony from witnesses, I watched the faces of the guests transform from confusion to horror to disgust. These were people who had known me since childhood, who had watched me grow up, and who were now learning that they had been manipulated into believing lies about my character and mental health. Brandon's threats became increasingly desperate as the evidence mounted against the family. His law license was clearly in jeopardy due to his participation in the inheritance fraud, and he knew that his entire career could be destroyed if the truth became public. Ashley's fiancé, meanwhile, had stopped recording and was staring at his future bride with obvious shock as he learned that their upcoming wedding had been funded with stolen money. The confrontation reached its peak when Mom, realizing that her denials were being systematically dismantled by hard evidence, attempted one final desperate manipulation. She clutched her chest dramatically and claimed to be having heart palpitations, insisting that I was trying to kill her with stress and that my lies and delusions, were threatening her health. But Mrs. Rodriguez, along with several other longtime family friends, had heard enough. "We've known Meredith since she was a little girl," Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly, "and she's never been anything but honest and responsible. The person you've been describing to us for years doesn't exist. You've been lying to our entire community." The revelation of community support was the final blow to the family's carefully constructed facade. As more guests began speaking up in my defense, sharing their own doubts about the stories they had been told, it became clear that Mom's reputation management campaign had finally collapsed under the weight of the truth. The evening ended with security being called, not to remove me as Brandon had threatened, but to escort the family out of the club after management received multiple complaints about the disruption. As I watched my mother, brother, and sister being led away in disgrace, still protesting their innocence and making threats about legal retaliation, I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness for what our family could have been if they had chosen love over manipulation. The days following the birthday party confrontation brought a period of deceptive calm that I should have recognized as the prelude to a storm. For 48 hours, there was no contact from any family member, no threatening phone calls, no angry text messages. I allowed myself to believe that perhaps the shock of being exposed so publicly had finally forced them to face the consequences of their actions. I was catastrophically wrong. The counterattack began on a Tuesday morning when I received a call from my supervisor at the marketing firm asking me to come in for an urgent meeting with the Human Resources Department. When I arrived at the office, I was greeted by the HR director and my immediate supervisor, both wearing expressions of serious concern that immediately set off alarm bells in my mind. "Meredith, we've received some very serious allegations about your conduct," the HR director began, pulling out a thick folder of documents. "Your mother contacted us yesterday claiming that you've been stealing money from elderly family members and using company resources to plan some kind of revenge scheme against your family. The allegations were meticulously crafted and devastatingly effective. Mom had provided the company with false documentation suggesting that I had been using work computers to access bank accounts illegally, had been making threatening phone calls to family members during business hours, and had even stolen money from my grandmother before her death. The lies were so elaborate and detailed that they had clearly been planned for weeks, if not months. We're going to have to place you on administrative leave pending a full investigation," my supervisor said apologetically. "I want you to know that I don't personally believe these allegations, but company policy requires us to take them seriously until we can verify the facts." Losing my job, even temporarily, was financially devastating and emotionally crushing. But it was only the beginning of the family's systematic campaign to destroy my life. That same afternoon, Brandon filed for a restraining order against me in family court, presenting fabricated evidence that I had been stalking family members, making threatening phone calls, and showing up at their homes in an agitated state. The court documents were masterpieces of legal manipulation, filled with detailed accounts of incidents that had never occurred, supported by witness statements from Ashley and Mom that painted me as an increasingly unstable individual who posed a genuine threat to family safety. Brandon had used his legal expertise to craft a narrative that was just plausible enough to convince a judge who had no prior knowledge of our family dynamics. Ashley's contribution to the revenge campaign was particularly cruel and effective. She launched a coordinated social media assault that reached hundreds of people in our extended social network. Using her substantial following on various platforms, she began sharing carefully edited recordings of our birthday party confrontation that made me appear hysterical and delusional while painting the family as innocent victims of my mental breakdown. The social media campaign included fabricated screenshots of text messages I had supposedly sent, threatening to harm family members and demanding money from elderly relatives. Ashley had clearly spent considerable time creating these false communications, making them just believable enough to convince people who didn't know the full story of what had actually happened. Within a week of the party, Dad was brought in to testify against my character in the restraining order hearing. Under intense pressure from Mom and facing the threat of financial ruin if he didn't comply, he provided sworn testimony that I had been increasingly erratic and threatening in recent months. Watching the man who had once taught me to ride a bicycle lie under oath about my character was perhaps the most heartbreaking moment of the entire ordeal. The restraining order was granted based on the fabricated evidence, which meant that I was now legally prohibited from contacting any family member or coming within 500 feet of their homes or workplaces. The legal restriction also applied to attending family events or gatherings, effectively cutting me off from extended family members who might have provided emotional support during this difficult time. The campaign against me extended beyond the immediate family to include manipulation of our extended family network. Moms systematically contacted aunts, uncles, and cousins with sob stories about my supposed mental breakdown and dangerous behavior. She convinced them that Dorothy was enabling my delusions and that anyone who supported me was putting themselves at risk of becoming targets of my unstable behavior. Within 2 weeks, virtually every member of our extended family had cut off contact with me entirely. Cousins I had been close to since childhood blocked me on social media without explanation. Aunts and uncles who had previously sent birthday cards and holiday greetings suddenly acted as if I didn't exist. The isolation was complete and devastating. The financial pressure mounted quickly as legal fees began accumulating from fighting the restraining order and preparing a defense against the workplace allegations. With my income temporarily suspended and legal costs mounting daily, I faced the very real possibility of losing my apartment and being forced into financial bankruptcy. Dorothy, who had been my strongest ally throughout the initial investigation and confrontation, began experiencing her own retaliation from the family. Her car was vandalized twice in 1 week, with threatening notes left under the windshield warning her to stay away from family business. She received anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night, and someone began spreading rumors in her neighborhood that she was harboring a dangerous individual. The psychological warfare was relentless and expertly orchestrated. Jake, who had provided both professional investigative services and personal emotional support throughout the ordeal, found his own business threatened when Brandon began contacting his clients with insinuations about his professional ethics and competence. The most insidious aspect of the family's retaliation campaign was their manipulation of community perceptions. They systematically contacted longtime family friends, neighbors, and local business owners with carefully crafted stories about my deteriorating mental state and increasingly dangerous behavior. These conversations were designed to isolate me socially and make it impossible for me to rebuild my reputation or find support within our community. Police welfare checks became a regular occurrence as family members called in reports of concerning behavior, claiming to be worried about my safety and the safety of others. Each visit from law enforcement officers reinforced the narrative that I was unstable and potentially dangerous, creating an official record of incidents that never actually occurred. The culmination of this phase of psychological warfare came when I received an eviction notice from my landlord, who had been contacted by someone claiming to be a family member warning about my erratic behavior and potential for property damage. The landlord, concerned about liability and property damage, decided to exercise his right to terminate my lease with 30 days' notice. As I sat in my apartment that evening, facing unemployment, legal battles, social isolation, and homelessness, I understood for the first time the full extent of my family's capacity for cruelty. They weren't just trying to discredit my claims about the inheritance theft. They were systematically attempting to destroy every aspect of my life to ensure that I would never again have the resources or credibility to challenge their narrative. The weeks that followed brought a darkness into my life that I had never experienced before, a suffocating weight that pressed down on every aspect of my existence and made even the simplest daily tasks feel impossible to complete. The combination of unemployment, legal battles, social isolation, and the constant threat of homelessness created a perfect storm of psychological pressure that pushed me closer to my breaking point with each passing day. My mental health deteriorated rapidly under the sustained attack from my family and the mounting pressure of fighting battles on multiple fronts simultaneously. Panic attacks became a daily occurrence, often triggered by something as simple as a phone ringing or a knock at the door. During the depositions and legal proceedings related to the restraining order case, I found myself hyperventilating and unable to speak coherently, which only served to reinforce their narrative about my supposed mental instability. The social media harassment campaign orchestrated by Ashley had expanded beyond her immediate following to include her friends and their networks, creating an echo chamber of cruelty that followed me everywhere I went online. Fake accounts were created specifically to send me threatening messages and to spread false information about my supposed criminal behavior and mental health issues. The harassment was sophisticated and relentless, designed to make me feel like there was no safe space left in the world. Former colleagues from my marketing firm began avoiding me in professional settings, clearly having heard rumors about the workplace allegations that had been fabricated against me. People I had worked with for years, individuals who had once respected my professionalism and competence, now looked at me with suspicion and discomfort. The professional reputation I had spent years building was crumbling under the weight of lies I had no power to effectively counter. The isolation extended to virtually every area of my social life. Childhood friends who had initially expressed support began distancing themselves after receiving phone calls from family members warning them about my dangerous behavior. The systematic campaign to discredit me had been so thorough and convincing that even people who had known me for decades began to question their own perceptions of my character. The financial pressure reached a crisis point when my savings were completely depleted by legal fees and living expenses during the period of unemployment. The eviction notice from my landlord created an impossible deadline that I had no realistic way of meeting. Facing the prospect of homelessness while fighting legal battles and trying to clear my name felt like an insurmountable challenge that would require resources I simply didn't possess. The lowest point came during a particularly brutal family court session where Brandon presented additional fabricated evidence of my supposed threats against family members. As I listened to sworn testimony from people who had once claimed to love me, describing incidents that had never occurred and character traits that bore no resemblance to who I actually was, I felt something fundamental break inside me. That evening, alone in my apartment with eviction papers spread across the kitchen table and legal documents scattered around the room, I found myself contemplating whether the fight was worth continuing. The family had unlimited resources, legal expertise, and a willingness to destroy everything I had worked for in my entire life. The prospect of years of legal battles, financial ruin, and social isolation felt overwhelming beyond my capacity to endure. It was Jake who found me that night, having become concerned when I didn't answer my phone for an entire day. His intervention probably saved my life, both literally and figuratively. He sat with me through the darkest hours, helping me understand that the family's campaign of destruction was actually evidence of their desperation, not their strength. "They're not doing this because they're confident," he explained, holding my hands as I sobbed with exhaustion and despair. "They're doing this because they're terrified. If they were truly innocent, they would rely on the legal system to vindicate them. Instead, they're trying to destroy you before you can present your case. That tells me we're closer to victory than you realize." During this period, Dorothy's health began declining noticeably under the stress of supporting me while facing her own retaliation from the family. The combination of her advancing age and the constant worry about my well-being was taking a visible toll on her physical and emotional health. Watching this wonderful woman suffer because of her loyalty to me added another layer of guilt and anguish to my already overwhelming burden. The therapy sessions I had started attending became a lifeline during this dark period, helping me understand that what I was experiencing was not just a family conflict, but a systematic pattern of emotional abuse that had been escalating for my entire life. The therapist helped me recognize that the current crisis was the inevitable result of decades of gaslighting, manipulation, and psychological control that had conditioned me to accept unacceptable treatment. "Your family has been training you your entire life to believe that you're not worthy of love, respect, or fair treatment," she explained during one particularly illuminating session. "The current situation is their response to you finally challenging that narrative. They're pulling out every weapon in their arsenal because they're terrified of losing their power over you." The realization that my grandmother had probably recognized this family dynamic and had specifically tried to provide me with resources to escape it added another dimension to my understanding of the situation. Her inheritance wasn't just about money or property. It was about giving me the financial independence to break free from a system of emotional abuse that had defined my entire relationship with my family. As the weeks passed and the legal battles continued, I gradually began to understand that this crisis, as painful and devastating as it was, might also represent an opportunity for liberation that I would never have found any other way. The family had overplayed their hand in their desperation to maintain control, and their excessive retaliation was beginning to create evidence of their true nature that even sympathetic observers couldn't ignore. The decision point came during a quiet moment in my therapist's office, when she asked me a simple question that crystallized everything. If you could go back to the way things were before the birthday party, knowing what you know now about how they really see you, would you want that? The answer was immediate and definitive. No, I wouldn't want to go back to living under their manipulation and control, even if fighting meant risking everything I had left. That realization marked the beginning of a fundamental shift in my approach to the battle. Instead of fighting defensively to preserve what little I had left, I began fighting offensively to reclaim what had been stolen from me and to expose the truth regardless of the personal cost. The family had underestimated my resilience and my commitment to justice, and they were about to learn that their campaign of destruction had only made me more determined to see this fight through to its conclusion. The transformation in my circumstances began with an unexpected breakthrough that came from the most unlikely source. Jake, who had been conducting his own parallel investigation while I struggled through the darkest period of my life, received a call from an anonymous source who claimed to have information about my mother's financial activities that went far beyond what we had already discovered. The caller turned out to be a casino surveillance supervisor who had been following the news coverage of our family's legal battles. Mom's gambling addiction, which we had identified as part of the inheritance theft, was actually far more extensive and problematic than we had realized. The casino records Jake obtained through his professional connections revealed a systematic pattern of financial fraud that extended back over 5 years. Your mother has been using multiple false identities and fabricated social security numbers to obtain credit from various casinos, Jake explained as he spread the evidence across my kitchen table. She's accumulated over $200,000 in gambling debts using fraudulent information, and she's been using money from your grandmother's estate to cover the interest payments. The evidence was devastating and irrefutable. Bank records showed a clear pattern of money being transferred from the inheritance accounts to cover casino debts, loan payments, and interest charges related to Mom's gambling activities. The scope of the financial fraud was far beyond simple inheritance theft. It constituted organized financial crime that could result in federal charges. The Internal Revenue Service investigation that Jake triggered through his contacts in federal law enforcement opened up entirely new avenues of evidence against the family. Mom had been systematically underreporting income for tax purposes, had failed to properly document the inheritance distributions, and had been illegally claiming benefits and deductions that she wasn't entitled to receive. Brandon's role in the financial conspiracy became even more apparent as federal investigators began examining the legal documents he had prepared to facilitate the inheritance theft. The fabricated signatures, forged notarizations, and false witness statements he had created constituted multiple felony counts of document fraud and legal malpractice that could result in both criminal charges and the permanent loss of his law license. The State Bar Association launched their own ethics investigation after receiving complaints about Brandon's conduct in our case. The combination of the inheritance fraud and his subsequent attempts to manipulate the court system through fabricated evidence created a pattern of professional misconduct that was impossible for the legal community to ignore. Ashley's world began crumbling when her fiancé, finally understanding the full extent of the financial fraud that had funded their relationship, broke off their engagement and demanded the return of all gifts and deposits that had been paid using stolen money. The public nature of their breakup, combined with the revelation that her entire lifestyle had been funded through inheritance theft, destroyed her social media presence and reputation within her social circle. The key witness who emerged during this period was a bank manager who had become suspicious of the unusual transaction patterns in the inheritance accounts and had kept detailed records of his concerns. His testimony about the irregular withdrawals, the suspicious signature patterns, and Mom's evasive behavior during account inquiries provided crucial evidence that corroborated our claims about the systematic theft. Mom's addiction counselor, bound by confidentiality requirements during the active treatment period, was eventually compelled by court order to testify about statements Mom had made during therapy sessions regarding the source of money she was using to pay for gambling debts. The counselor's reluctant testimony revealed that Mom had explicitly admitted to using inheritance money that didn't belong to her. Dad's decision to finally break his silence and cooperate with investigators marked the turning point in the entire case. The years of intimidation and financial blackmail had taken a severe toll on his health and mental state, and he eventually reached a point where he could no longer participate in the deception. His detailed testimony about the family's coordinated efforts to steal the inheritance and cover up the theft provided the missing pieces that investigators needed to build a comprehensive case. The police fraud investigation launched by the district attorney's office brought the full weight of law enforcement to bear on the family's criminal activities. Search warrants were executed on their homes and financial records, uncovering additional evidence of fraudulent activities that extended beyond the inheritance theft to include insurance fraud, tax evasion, and identity theft. My employer, faced with clear evidence that the allegations against me had been completely fabricated, not only reinstated me with full back pay, but also issued a public apology for the way the situation had been handled. The company also announced that they were pursuing legal action against individuals who had made false claims about employee conduct. The community support that had been systematically undermined by the family's lies began to rebuild as the truth became public through legitimate news coverage and court proceedings. Mrs. Rodriguez and other longtime family friends who had been deceived by Mom's manipulation campaign began speaking out publicly about how they had been lied to and used as unwitting participants in the campaign against me. The legal victories began mounting rapidly as the fabricated evidence supporting the restraining order was exposed through forensic analysis and witness testimony. The court not only dismissed the restraining order but also sanctioned Brandon for filing false documents and wasting court resources with frivolous legal proceedings. The inheritance recovery process, overseen by a court-appointed special master, resulted in the return of not just the original $50,000 but also accumulated interest, penalties, and damages that brought the total recovery to over $200,000. The financial compensation far exceeded what I had originally lost and provided me with the resources to rebuild my life completely. Brandon's legal career effectively ended when the State Bar Association moved forward with disbarment proceedings based on the extensive evidence of professional misconduct, document fraud, and abuse of legal processes. The loss of his law license also triggered the dissolution of his marriage, as his wife filed for divorce and sought to protect their assets from the criminal and civil litigation he was facing. Ashley, stripped of her social media following and facing civil litigation for her role in the defamation campaign, was forced to return the engagement ring, wedding deposits, and expensive jewelry that had been purchased with stolen inheritance money. Her former lifestyle of luxury and social prominence collapsed entirely as the source of her funding was exposed and eliminated. The validation that came with each legal victory helped heal the emotional wounds that had been inflicted during the family's campaign of destruction. More importantly, it demonstrated to everyone who had been deceived by their lies that I had been telling the truth all along about their character and their willingness to destroy anyone who challenged their control. The final court session that concluded our legal battle was a moment of such profound vindication that I struggled to fully comprehend the magnitude of what we had accomplished. The judge's ruling was comprehensive and unambiguous, awarding me not only the full inheritance amount with accumulated interest, but also additional damages for emotional distress, legal fees, and punitive compensation that brought the total financial recovery to over $200,000. Mom's sentencing hearing was a surreal experience that brought a mixture of relief and sadness as I watched the woman who had given birth to me being held accountable for years of criminal behavior. The judge sentenced her to 2 years of supervised probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory participation in gambling addiction treatment programs. More significantly, She was ordered to pay full restitution for all stolen funds and was permanently banned from serving as an executor or trustee of any estate. Brandon's legal career officially ended with his disbarment, but the consequences extended far beyond his professional life. He was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for document fraud and faced additional civil litigation from former clients who had discovered irregularities in their legal matters. His wife's divorce proceedings had been particularly brutal, as she sought to distance herself and their children from the scandal that had destroyed their social standing and financial security. Ashley faced her own reckoning when the civil court ruled in favor of multiple defamation lawsuits filed by people she had targeted during her social media campaign against me. She was ordered to pay substantial damages and was required to issue public apologies and retractions for the false statements she had made. Her former fiancé's lawsuit for the return of wedding deposits and gifts had left her virtually bankrupt and completely dependent on temporary work to survive. Dad, who had finally found the courage to break free from Mom's manipulation and control, was granted an uncontested divorce that awarded him protective custody of their remaining marital assets. His decision to cooperate with the investigation and testify truthfully about the family's criminal activities had earned him immunity from prosecution and had allowed him to begin rebuilding his life with dignity and independence. The house that my grandmother had left to me became the symbol of my new beginning and the fulfillment of her final wish for my independence and happiness. Moving into the familiar rooms where I had spent countless happy hours as a child felt like coming home in a way that I had never experienced before. Every corner of the house held memories of the one family member who had loved me unconditionally, and restoring the property became a therapeutic process that helped heal the emotional wounds from years of abuse and manipulation. Dorothy, whose health had been severely impacted by the stress of supporting me through the darkest period of the battle, moved into the guest bedroom of the house and began recovering both physically and emotionally in the supportive environment we created together. Her presence brought wisdom, companionship, and the kind of family connection that I had never experienced with my immediate relatives. Jake's proposal came during a quiet evening as we worked together to restore my grandmother's garden to its former beauty. The ring he presented had belonged to his own grandmother, and his request to spend our lives together represented the kind of genuine love and partnership that I had never believed was possible for someone like me. Our engagement marked not just a romantic milestone, but also the creation of a new family based on mutual respect, honest communication, and unconditional support. The process of reconciling with extended family members who had been deceived by Mom's manipulation campaign was gradual but ultimately healing. Many cousins, aunts, and uncles reached out with apologies and explanations of how they had been systematically lied to about my character and behavior. The family gatherings that resumed were different from anything I had experienced before, characterized by genuine warmth, honest communication, and the kind of acceptance I had always craved. My career advancement accelerated rapidly after my return to work, as colleagues and supervisors who had witnessed my grace under pressure during the legal battle recognized my resilience and integrity. The promotion to marketing director came with substantial salary increase and the opportunity to lead projects that utilized skills I had developed during the months of investigating and exposing complex financial fraud. The therapy sessions that had sustained me through the darkest period of the battle continued as a tool for processing years of accumulated trauma and developing healthy relationship patterns. Understanding the psychological mechanisms behind gaslighting, emotional manipulation, and systematic abuse helped me recognize these patterns in other contexts and develop the tools to protect myself from future exploitation. My volunteer work with elder abuse prevention organizations became a way to use my experience constructively to help other families recognize and address financial exploitation of vulnerable family members. Speaking at community workshops about the warning signs of inheritance theft and family financial fraud helped me transform my painful experience into a resource for protecting others from similar abuse. The final lesson that emerged from this transformative experience was the understanding that true family isn't defined by blood relationships, but by the people who consistently choose love, support, and truth over convenience, manipulation, and self-interest. The family I built with Jake, Dorothy, and the extended relatives and friends who stood by me through the battle was stronger and more genuine than anything I had experienced with my immediate relatives. The house my grandmother left me became not just a home, but a gathering place for the kind of family celebrations I had always dreamed of hosting. Holiday dinners filled with laughter, honest conversation, and mutual appreciation replaced the tense, manipulative gatherings that had characterized my childhood. Every room echoed with the warmth and acceptance that my grandmother had always shown me, and that I was now able to extend to others who needed the same kind of unconditional support. As I sit in my grandmother's kitchen today, planning our upcoming wedding with Jake and Dorothy's enthusiastic assistance, I often feel her presence in the gentle breeze that moves through the oak tree outside the window where I used to play as a child. The inheritance she left me wasn't just money and property. It was the gift of independence, self-respect, and the financial security to choose relationships based on love rather than necessity. The receipt that started this entire journey, the evidence of my exclusion from Mom's birthday party, now sits framed in my study as a reminder of how profoundly my life has changed. What began as a moment of devastating rejection became the catalyst for discovering my own strength, claiming my rightful inheritance, and building the authentic family relationships I had always deserved. Have you ever experienced a moment of betrayal that ultimately led to discovering your own strength and resilience? Share your thoughts in the comments below about how you've overcome family manipulation or fought for what was rightfully yours. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories of triumph over family drama. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they're not alone in fighting against family members who prioritize control over love. Thank you for joining me on this journey of transformation and healing, and remember that sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to demand the respect and treatment we deserve. May you find the strength to build the family you choose rather than simply accepting the family you were born into.